we would like to welcome our honorable chief guest of the day, Mr. Edwin Moses. Mr. Moses works with Oracle as Group Vice President, leading a global line of business that provides consulting services to the banking vertical. He has more than 30 years of experience spanning industries, functions, cultures, and geographies. Mr. Moses has worked with companies across multiple industry segments such as automotive, specialized tooling, management consulting, telecom, and banking. His responsibilities have been at both operational and leadership levels in functions as diverse as manufacturing, sales, product management, after-sales service, and engineering delivery. May I now request Mr. Moses to please come over to the stage to address the gathering.
Good morning. Very good morning to you and respected director, professors, the faculty, the students, the organizing committees, my fellow professionals from the industry, ladies and gentlemen. I want to start by expressing my immense gratitude for this opportunity to be able to share, able to perhaps touch a few lives, to be able to enrich, and for the great privilege of being enriched myself through the sharing that I will be able to do. In the 28 and 30 years of my career, 11 of this 30 years was spent in telecom. Spent watching technology move from 2G and all the way till it hit 3.5G, and then I shifted domains. I've always told people I'm a rolling stone. I've started my career designing engines for Yamaha in Japan and went into manufacturing and then to consulting in embedded systems and telecom, and now I look at banking as a vertical for Oracle. And whenever people tell me, Edwin, you're a rolling stone, I tell them about, those days we used to have a book called Reader's Digest. It's still there today, but I don't know very many people read it, but it was a great access to knowledge at my time. And the very first page, whenever we got a new issue of Reader's Digest, I used to rush to it and open up the very first page because it used to have a section called Quotable Quotes. And one such quote perhaps inspired me on how I planned my career and my life. It said, "A rolling stone gathers no moss," and that we all know. But what it said later was very fascinating. It says, "But moss is not what it wants to gather. What it wants to gather is momentum." And that's how I try to shape my life. And why am I sharing this with you? I'm sharing this with you because it's got a relevance to how I intend to spend the next 25, 30 minutes of your valuable time in sharing my thoughts. As I was sitting in... Yeah, thank you. Just this forward and this back. Appreciate that, thanks. As I was sitting down and thinking, what is it I should talk about? What is it that I should perhaps share with very distinguished academicians and very hungry and curious young minds? I thought I had it till yesterday when I boarded the flight. I was pretty clear what I was going to do. And then, by the time the flight landed, I had changed my mind. And there was two young people that received me at the airport, and one was a lady called Pallavi. She's not here, but as I was traveling with her in the car, I shared my thought. And I said, how would you feel if I took this path instead of this? And it wasn't the market sampling in any way because it was not statistical in nature. But she said, yeah, that'd be a great idea. Now, maybe she was just being courteous, but I thought it was a great idea too. And so I changed my mind. I said, I'm not going to talk about the gig economy. I'm not going to talk about big data. I'm not going to talk about artificial intelligence. I'm not going to talk about all the lovely things that are happening in the world. Microservices, APIfication, whatever you want to talk about. There's no shortage of topics to talk about. I said that's going to take care of itself across the next 2 days. There are distinguished people that are going to come on the stage and they're going to talk about it. So I said it would be a waste of time if I talked about, providing a vision for the future, because it's just a vision. And like I always tell my people at the beginning of every quarter when they give me a forecast for my business, I tell them the best forecast is after the event. So what can I envision? I can envision as far as the human mind can see, the human eye can see. But I thought very often, as I go through life and you see organizations losing their way, you see people losing their way in their careers, and I'm always reminded of a very fascinating quote I read. And it went like this. It was one of these Dilbert quotes, and it said, "We are lost, but what the heck? We are making good time." So you see, very often, organizations that stray. You read a book by Keynotespeaker called The Mind of a Strategist. It says, when companies go downhill, the funny thing is they do everything in their powers to make sure they die fast. It's one of the fascinating things about strategy. We can talk about that for one whole day, just that single thought. I said, I'm not going to spend time, therefore, talking about the vision for tomorrow. I said I want to talk about, give you the benefit of the 11 years I spent in telecom, working with some of the best minds in the world, working with some of the best firms in the world in the telecom industry, watching base stations grow from huge, big boxes to pico base stations, watching phones grow from, if you go to the Docomo Museum in Japan, you'll see their first phone. It's as big as a brick to what we use today. I saw displays moving from 65 pixels to what are they today? 560, 570, 580, something like that. And there are stories in that industry that very few people know. There are stories in that industry that's not even documented. We are lost in the moment of iPhones and Galaxies and S9s and everything else. I thought I'd give you the benefit of the stories. I give the benefit of things that you perhaps will, in my own humble way, never get to listen to very easily. I said before we embark on this exciting journey of the future, it is always important for us, before we go together towards tomorrow, I said maybe we should let ourselves to pause and reflect. Why should you do that? Because like somebody says, history repeats itself. And very beautifully put after that, it says, history repeats itself because we fail to listen. And over the next 20, 25 minutes, I'm going to take you through my thought process about what we can learn from this great industry called telecom. Because in my entire career, living in different parts of the world, working with some of the finest people and companies, I'm yet to see an industry that has been so exciting on two dimensions. One, at the extent and speed of its change. If I take a benchmark in telecom of when inflection happened, it was sometime in 1998 when somebody said we need to hit data and voice together and 2.5G and edge as a standard was being done. To today, when we have quad plays and everything else that's happening. There's not a single industry that in the span of 20 years has changed life like never before. Look at the way we live our lives today. You can't even imagine how we live it. I'm sure even the best visionary sitting in 1995 would have imagined we'd live our life this way. How ubiquitous communication and telecom has become in our lives. That's the first exciting thing. And there's more to come. That's even more exciting. But at the same time, on a more sobering note, I have never seen an industry so brutal as to cause the death of world-class firms. Not one, not two, many of them. The baby bells don't exist anymore. Nokia is not even relevant to conversation. BlackBerry is more a fruit than a device. You go through the firms, they don't exist. I meet friends in the industry today, and they used to be big guys in big firms, used to work in the Lucents and the Bell Labs, and today they are an ignominy. I have never seen an industry like this before, and I don't think we'll get to see the industry like this ever again. So I felt this is a great space for us to spend some time to pause and reflect. I'm going to intersperse my thought processes to you with examples both from the telecom world and the non-telecom world. Why am I going to do that? Because the truth of the matter is, I tell people that I was sharing this with the young lady in the car yesterday. I love saying this. When people, once, my boss tells me the story, and his nephew came to him, having finished his education in the Film Institute, and he told his uncle, that's my boss, hey, what do you want to do, man? I want to be in movie making. And his uncle told him, buddy, you probably won't have a job in a few years from now. This guy was shocked. He's from Premier Institute. What do you mean I want to have a job? Of course you want to have a job. Why? Why is that? Because movie as a concept may not even exist. Movie as a thought may not even exist. So you're on the wrong career, buddy. You better think again. This young man obviously must have been shattered. He said, so what do I do? He said, get out of this movie-making business and you get into the storytelling business. Wow. Because that's timeless. There's always going to be a story to tell. There are always going to be people waiting to listen to a story as we can see today. And there'll always be a person to tell a story. That's timeless. You go look at one of the finest strategies in the world, it's Walt Disney, and they're timeless. Why are they timeless? Because it took Mr. Disney many decades to search for answering a question, what business am I in? And you may say, why did it take him so many years? Well, I've found that some of the most successful people are so idiotic, they take their time. Like I tell my people, I prepare a lot. My IQ is just 36. Just short of being a moron. I prepare a lot. Walt Disney took many years before he said, I'm in the business of theme parks? No. I'm in the business of movies? No. Why? They're timed. He said, I'm in the business of making people happy. So you look at the theme of a Walt Disney, no matter what they do, whether they're bringing our comics to life today with the Marvel books or the Marvel movies, he's in the business of making people happy. That's timeless. And therefore, I thought I'd give you the same gift, is to use telecom, because you know what? This story of telecom 10, 20 years into your career will probably be a distant memory. Maybe there won't even be a domain called telecom. So what value will you get if I told you where telecom is headed? I'd rather give you what we extract as knowledge and wisdom from this brilliant industry, this unique industry that you can keep for the rest of your life. So I'm not going to teach you movie making. I'm going to share with you the equivalent of storytelling in the telecom space. Pretty long introduction. I'll try to make the rest short. When I look back, I was working with a firm called Sasken, joined them in the Silicon Valley, and then we decided to bring it to India. I have never worked for a company like that again. We were, when $30 million, we were a day one hour recruiter at IITs. We had a dream job. Why? Because we're taking on the Qualcomms of the world. We're taking on the Lucents of the world. We were defining the third generation protocol. We're defining the next generation of broadband standards. Exciting times. We filed patents on the way. We took on the world. Oh, we did wonderful things. I had the best of young minds working for me. And as we were sitting down at that time in 2003, and we asked ourselves, where is telecom headed? How are we going to grasp our head around it? How do we put a framework in place that will help us to be timeless in being able to predict where the market is headed? May not be accurate to the extent of saying there's going to be a Facebook, and there's going to be an Amazon, and there's going to be a Twitter. May not be at that level, but did we have a framework for thought? And I pulled that out. I pulled out that white paper that we wrote. And I looked back at it with an honest mind, and I said, man, some thoughts are so beautiful. They're timeless. So I'm going to share that thought with you. And this framework is timeless in my opinion. How do I define telecom? Somebody needs to help me with this. Oh, there it is. Takes its time. We said there are 3 T's. There are going to be 3 C's in telecom. This was the time of 2001, 2002. I had a team just writing down this, looking at the standards for MPEG-3, for MP3s and MPEG-4s. I had another team that looking at H.264 definitions. And we said the first thing that's going to happen in telecom is people are going to consume content. They're going to listen to music. That's all eyes could see. We never thought they're going to consume photographs, and they're going to consume Twitter handles, and they're going to consume this, and they're going to consume that. Are they going to even consume knowledge today on a platform like Coursera, for example? We didn't even think that. We said people are going to consume. We got to build devices that can consume. And then another bright guy said, you know what? It's not just one consume. People are going to create. We didn't think that it's going to be YouTube. In fact, one of the founders of YouTube itself said, my company won't progress for very long. How long will people spend looking at videos is what he said, and he walked away. The rest is history. And the third thing we said was fascinating when I look back. We said they'll collaborate. And when I go back to the root, at that time I went back to the root of the word collaborate. Collaborate came from the Latin root, which meant community. And today you've got a Facebook community, you've got a Twitter community. Well, you know, even today I sit with some of my old friends, have a drink with them and say, man, oh man, if only we could have interpreted this and say each one of them is so great. I could have actually created Amazon Prime. I could have actually done Netflix, only I knew how the hell to do it. And what about creating? Man, you know what? Creating, I could have actually done Snapchat myself. What about collaborating? Oh my God, I could have done everything. Collaborate? Well, today you got, you know, what about Uber? That's collaboration. What about the marketplace? That's collaboration. Shuck. How many opportunities did I miss to be a multi-billionaire? Didn't I? Didn't we? That's not important. What's important is this framework still holds true. And I want to give this to you as a gift. Keep this as a framework because I think it's timeless. Your profs will tell you, principles are natural laws, they're timeless. And I think this is one such principle. 3 C's of communication. As I've been through this entire space of telecom over the last so many years, what can we learn from them? We can learn that, like I told you, the first 3 C's told you the beauty of why this has changed our lives. It's changed the way we consume, it's changed the way we create, and we changed the way we collaborate, isn't it? Yes? And it's going to do even more than that. But let's go to this other part of it. I told you it's the second part. Of all these casualties and deaths, what can we learn from that? The first part tells us that innovation is timeless. The first part tells us, as you know, this latest ads that come in, I forgot which one that is, but it says the starting point is the finish line. Every time you think you've reached an end, there is a new beginning. That is the hope for technology, and at a bigger plane, that's the hope for mankind, isn't it? But let's go to the other side, the sad side of death. Texas Instruments doesn't exist in the telecom semiconductor space anymore. Nokia doesn't. There used to be a company called Sony Ericsson. It doesn't exist anymore. There used to be a company called Motorola. I don't know where it is. What can we learn from that? 3 things that we're going to learn. When you look at that, you can put all those companies into 3 boxes. You can now take all your service providers, the Vodafones and the Ideas, and the Qualcomms and the Apples and the Samsungs and everybody else into these 3 boxes. And you can decide for yourself which box do these companies lie in. Not just that, you can take yourselves and put it into these 3 boxes. Just replace the word consumer with your name. The first category of box of companies in the telecom world was companies in denial. Let's talk about companies in denial and start from a non-telecom example and move to a telecom example. A story is told that the lawyer of Henry Ford went to the president of the First Savings Bank and asked his advice as to whether he should invest in the Ford Motor Company. And guess what advice he got? He said, buddy, do not do it. Horses are here to stay. Automobiles are only a passing phase. These are not stupid people, they're clever people. Ever heard of a gentleman called Ken Olsen? Ken Olsen used to head a company called Digital Equipment Corporation, DEC. DEC is the one that created smart minis that gave IBM a scare of their life. Small computer competing with mainframes. They're the guys who gave us our Ethernet. At the peak, in the state of Massachusetts, Digital Equipment Corporation is the 2nd largest employer after the government of Massachusetts. Seriously successful. They died. Why? Because his team went and told him, sir, the future is in computing. x86 is coming from Intel. We better get into home computers. And Ken Olsen said, what the hell would people do with computers at home? This is Ken Olsen. This is like Albert Einstein saying something like that. Let's talk about now come. This is 2 examples outside. Let's come to telecom. I'm going to tell you a story that you don't know. Even the profs won't know. No royalties. You can reuse the story anytime. And the story is ringside seat, first information, live telecast. Starting in 1998, used to work very closely with a firm called Texas Instruments. Texas Instruments were pioneering guys. They created the modem for the phones. And they had a huge share of the market. 100% of Nokia phones are made with a TI processor. 100%, near 100% of Sony Ericsson. There were only 5 big players in the handset space at that time. Number 1, Nokia. Number 2, Motorola. Number 3, Sony Ericsson. Number 4, Samsung. Number 5, LG. There was nobody other than that. And of them, Texas Instruments had 100% of Nokia, near 100% of Sony Ericsson, about 50% of Samsung, and about another 60% of Motorola. Imagine the power they had. And then came in 2004 a small company called MediaTek. Ever heard of it? I was sitting in Sask and a guy walked in from Taiwan. He's sitting at the reception and he said, I want to see this guy. He used to head products at that time. He said, I want to license your protocol stack, 2G, 2.5G. And we sat down, he was willing to pay us royalty, he was willing to pay us a license fee, but he didn't have too much money. So, but everyone else was paying 2 million, 3 million license fee. He said, I can pay you $500,000. He was offering us, royalty. We looked at it, we sat down and said, who the hell is this guy, MediaTek? No Google at that time, but, we did our research and we said, this guy is a small guy. He makes chips for the DVDs. You know what? Telecom, the best of minds. Only Bell Lab guys can do telecom. He can't do it, man. He has to compete with ST Micro, Intel, Qualcomm, TI. Not possible. So we went back, put him in the meeting room and said, Bud, we'll do a deal with you. No royalty, all cash up front. Your credit rating is poor. We didn't tell him that. We did what is called a suitcase deal. Done and dusted. Gave him the source code, gave him derivative rights and said, bye-bye. Hope to see you sometime. What happened? What happened? As of maybe 2-3 years back, when last tracked them, 500 million mobile phones have been sold with MediaTek chipset. How? This guy went to China, and there used to be a saying in telecom in those days which said, thought leadership came from Europe, the silicon was made in the United States, and the money was made in China. That's what we used to say in the telecom world. Perhaps it's still true. This guy went into a place called Shenzhen in China, and he convinced a whole bunch of guys they could make phones. They said, phones, we can't make phones. Motorola can make phones. Lucent can make phones. No, you can make phones. He created a reference design, ready to go, with plastic, everything. People put up sheds. I'm talking about 2004, 2005, 2006. You and I could go there at the starting end of the shed and say, I want a phone. He'll say, what kind? You can show him any kind. He'll say, come back after 10 days, I'll give it to you. How do they do it? MediaTek's reference design. TI was watching it, everybody else is watching and laughing at him and said, you know what? They'll fail. Rest is history. 2008, TI exited the mobile phone business. MediaTek, it still survives, extraordinarily successful. Who does it compete with? Qualcomm. Story number one. Story number two is about telecom operators. 3 assertions of companies in denial. Assertion number one is historical. You go through history, you'll find that people who leveraged infrastructure made more money than the guy who created the infrastructure. The guy who made railroads in the United States didn't make as much money as the guy who used the railroad to transport the oil to the East Coast, to the West Coast, so that they could feed the hungry machines in Europe. The guy who invented internet didn't make money. Perhaps we don't even know who he is. Perhaps we don't even care. The guy who made all the money is Jeff Bezos and everybody else. Yes? The guy who's running Air India, the guy doesn't have money to put gas in his tank today. He has all the aircraft. Who makes the money? Somebody is giving food to the aircraft, somebody's putting fuel in the aircraft. He's making the money. Historically and strategically, it's been proven that the person who uses the technology or the infrastructure always will end up making the more money. Economic growth, I'm sure there's a prof of economics who's going to stone me after this and say you got it all wrong, but perhaps not. The first big growth of economics came through what is called as, what I like to call as revenue, as rent extraction. Somebody, probably it came from the landowner's side. Somebody owned land, he rented it and said, pay for it. Banks did the same. They rented their money and they took it back with interest, but it was nothing but rental extraction. Let's fast forward. Operators work entirely on rental extraction. Go look at your bill next time, it'll say rent. But rental extraction is no longer valid anymore because the market moved and said the next big growth vector was connecting the buyer and the seller, and I made money in between. However, I kept the buyer and seller as black boxes. enter the Ubers of the world. They created platforms. They said, I don't make money off anybody, sir. I only make money to facilitate this meeting. I'm not even going to tell you at what price to sell. I'm not even going to tell you who to sell it to. I just connect people. You know, but it doesn't seem they've learned from history. I just saw the other day, Idea is launching a movie service and a television service. Who the hell wants it? Do you? I don't. I'm happy with Netflix. I'm happy with Amazon Prime. I'm happy with YouTube when I want to see a free movie. I still go to the theater when I want it to be different. It's a bad idea. Somebody's got to tell them that. Master G, bad idea. But then, companies in denial. And that's what Albert Einstein said. The world is created as a process of our thinking. And if we want to change the world, we need to change our thinking. Unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, that is the most difficult thing to change. I'm a great student of strategy. But I always end up by saying, the key driver to strategy is human interest. Second box of companies. Companies that respond. Let me tell you a story again. Ringside story. You wouldn't have heard of this company. This company, I'll be astonished if any of you heard, or very few of you would have heard. Maybe Prof would have heard, with his passion for technology. He perhaps would have heard. But this company is one of the most successful players in telecom. You would not have heard of him. You would not even go and do a Google search for him or her, for this company, and yet this company was sold for $31.4 billion in 2016 to SoftBank. How much? Million? What did he say? He said what? All right, I heard it right. Billion. And we don't even know this company. The name of the company is called Acorn Computers. Ever heard of them? Never heard of Acorn Computers. I'm surprised, but they're not called Acorn Computers, so you wouldn't have heard of them. Well, let me tell you, the story begins with Acorn Computers in the 1980s, founded in the United Kingdom. They actually came to the limelight because the government of UK wanted to start a program called BBC Micro. It meant it was the British government initiated to put a computer in every school, and they needed a chipset. And the only other company making computers at that time that was in that category was Apple. Yeah, Apple again, 90s. And then watch what happened. So these guys made the first advanced RISC machines. And that computer project failed, like all government projects. This too failed. And then this guy was scratching his head when he realized Apple had a need for him. Apple wanted to make the Newton. That's the first computer of Apple. And Apple didn't have a RISC chip. So they wanted to buy it from Acorn, but they went and told Acorn, hey, but I can't buy it from you because you're my competition. It doesn't look good. And you know how bad they competed? Acorn called itself Acorn because in the telephone directory, C came before P. So they were listed as Acorn and then Apple. So they joined together with another company called VLSI, and they formed a company called ARM. ARM. Advanced RISC machines. I worked with ARM 7 at that time at 38 megahertz. And we struggled on how we could play music and modem at the radio signal together. 37 megahertz MIPS was consumed by the radio signal. We had one MIP for the music. And then we had to put an algorithm that needed to make the music stop when a call came in, and we didn't know how to do it. This company changed the business model. They thought of platform a long time. He decided he's no longer going to, no, he actually made the chip for Apple, and Apple Newton failed. That's when Steve Jobs left and went. You know that, right? This guy was left with nothing. He said, man, I'm going to learn a lesson. So there's a CEO called Sir Robin Saxby that came in, joined from Motorola, and he changed the model. He said, I'm not going to make chips anymore. I'm going to license the IP. And guess what? He had a big breakthrough. He had a big breakthrough because it came from TI. TI took his ARM 7 processor and built it in a phone called Nokia 6110. Go look at it in the market. The rest is history. Today, there is no phone. 98% of the world's phones carries ARM's IP. But guess what? ARM doesn't make a single chip. How funny is that? Uber is the world's largest taxi operator. It doesn't have a taxi. Facebook is the world's most popular media platform. Doesn't have media. It doesn't own content. Mr. Idea, listen. Yeah. Alibaba is the most valuable retailer, but he has zero inventory. Man, what the hell is happening? Airbnb, largest accommodation provider, owns not a single room. ARM, the largest shipping chip in devices, they don't make a single chip. These are companies that responded. And as Charles Darwin says, it's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent. That takes all of us out of the room, right? It's the one most responsive to change. Category number 3. Do you like these stories? Yeah, good. There's a small box outside. You can put in your money inside there. Just joking. I tell this to my people in the meetings, and they say, "What?" And I say, everything's virtual today. Don't worry about it. The third are companies that reinvent. I want to tell you 2 stories, one from outside, one from inside, one that you would perhaps know. There's a company called Intel. I'm telling this story because it's so difficult to change. And that's how I'm going to end my thought as to why it's difficult to change. Intel, in 1983, Intel was leaders in the memory chips business. Their turnover was $1.1 billion. Their profits was $198 million, make it $200 million. And those of you who are whiz kids in math, can you quickly tell me what's that margin? They made $200 million out of $1.2 billion. How much is that? Some number between 10 and 20%, okay? Doesn't matter. And for a tech firm, it's great. They created the Moore's Law. They didn't realize Moore's Law would also work in the memory business. Before they knew it, the Japanese were making memory at a fraction of the cost, and in just 1 year, their profits dropped from 200 million to, guess what? Come on, guys, say something. Guess what? How much? 20 million, okay? Guys, you don't even know the meaning of the word tragedy. It dropped down to $2 million. And those of you who read a book that's called Only the Paranoid Survive, written by Andy Grove, one of the co-founders, CEOs of one of my favorite books. I read it ever so often. This starts the story by saying he and his co-founder are sitting in a room and saying, "Man, you know what, we're in bad shape." I wanted to use another word starting with S, but I didn't because it's on social media. But we are in bad shape. What should we do? And Andy Grove made one of those famous statements. He said, if we get replaced, if the board replaced us both today, what do you think the new guy is going to come and do? And he said, oh, well, he's going to take us out of the memory business. He said, why don't we hold hands, walk out of the room, and come back in and do just that? And you know what they did? They walked into the microprocessor business. For the only time, they laid off 8,000 people. For the only time, they made a loss for the next year. But they brought the microprocessor business, and hold on to your seats, because they didn't invent the microprocessor. They did it in 1971, but it was using in toasters and lights. The rest is history. The other company that responded to change, reinvented themselves, was Samsung. I had the privilege of working with them on their first Galaxy phone. I saw how they worked. First they panicked. They tried to create an imitation of the iPhone. They tried to create a marketplace. They had a Linux operating system called Ubuntu. They worked on Windows, and then they had Android, and they didn't know where to go. And finally, they took a bet. And in 2009, they said, let's go back to our roots. We are not a software company. We know hardware better than anybody else. So you go look at the Samsung today and look at all its positioning. It'll talk of hardware and hardware only. Samsung is alive and healthy. These are companies that respond, that reinvent themselves. This is the Richard Branson's favorite quote, Virgin Guy. I love it. It may be hard for an egg to turn into a bird, but it'll be jolly sight harder for the bird to learn the egg to learn how to fly. We all cannot be like eggs. We just have to either hatch or they have to go rotten. In strategy, there's no term called status quo. If you're not moving forward, you're automatically moving back. Last slide. Why we change? Because some of us believe good times will last forever. BlackBerry did that. Now it's a fruit. We're caught up in the short term. A company called Netflix came in. There's a company called Blockbuster that's incumbent. They could easily have changed because Netflix came and said, take the DVD, use it for as many days as you want, no fines. And Blockbuster said, but you know what, if you don't return it after 3 days, I fine you. How easy it would have been for Blockbuster to say, let's not charge fines. But you know why they couldn't? You know why? Because they got getting $300 million of bottom line from late fees. They're obsessed with the short term. Fear of cannibalizing the business. There was a phone called Motorola Razr. Do any of you know it? It's the largest phone ever sold. 130 million units were sold. I was working in Saskin. We were part of the team that Motorola wanted to create another phone, which never saw the market. It was called Kicker. They went and hired, what's the guy, Beckham, to be the brand ambassador for the phone, because this phone was made of the new material, and when you pulled it as a slider, it would bend it. And it's called Bend It Like Beckham. The project was called Noir, in French means dark. It never saw the light of day because the guys who owned the Razr played the politics inside Motorola and made sure this never saw the light of day. Kodak invented digital photography in 1975, but they didn't cannibalize their films because they had 96% market share. So when you listen to all the visions of the next 2 days, keep this in mind. Organizations are built around clever people. I started my life in Japan. Innovation is Kaizen. And everybody in Japan does Kaizen. As long as organizations learn to work with clever people, they will fail. Organizations are built on averages. You need to have islands of genius for sure. But the engine is the average. As you clever people go out to lead teams, remember that. And finally, they're going around. I have movies. Do you have a problem? No, sir, I don't. Steve Jobs didn't do that. He spent time understanding a problem. I don't have time. But you may want to read a book called Competing Against Luck by a gentleman called Clay Christensen, who's a professor of strategy and the master of probably the inventor of the term innovation. Read that book. I'll go to the YouTube video and say, read a story about milkshakes, jobs to be done, and you'll understand what that means. So much to learn from such exciting industry. So much to look forward to, and so much to be careful of. And by saying, the secret of change is therefore to focus all your energy not on fighting the old, but fighting the new. It's been a pleasure sharing with you. And I can only say, I'm grateful for the opportunity to enrich and be enriched. God bless you.
Mr. Moses?
Sir, I request you to please stay on stage for a while.
Thank you, Mr. Moses, for such an invigorating address. I request my colleagues to felicitate the chief guest with a memento as a token of our gratitude and appreciation. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.